Potential pros have until midnight tonight, Wednesday night, to withdraw from the NBA draft. Saw a couple notable players do that yesterday in Yaxel Lendeborg and Alex Condon. Auburn's Tahad Pettiford, the highest graded prospect who's still in the draft as of now, but could pull out before midnight tonight. Pettiford is ranked in the top 30 on our big board. Let's get Adam Finkelstein and Kyle Boone in here on this last day to make that big decision. And it's more of a decision now than it used to be, because players like Lendeborg can potentially make more money next year in college than they would in the NBA. He had been mocked as a potential first rounder. Why did he decide to come back to college and play at Michigan, Kyle?
Yeah, I think this is all about earning power for Yaxel Lendeborg. This is a guy who starred last season at UAB. There wasn't a big spotlight on him last season at the college level. He got a lot of steam during the NBA draft process, and there was a chance that he could have been selected in the 20s in this year's NBA draft. He's committed to Michigan. He's going to transfer to Michigan, and he's going to make multi-millions doing it next season. And oh, by the way, he probably has a chance to rise throughout the next year. Michigan is going to be a borderline top 10 team. Yaxel is going to be a key piece of that. I project that he'll be a first-round pick in next year's draft class and could play his way into being a potential top 20 pick, all while making a buku of money. So I think this is a good decision for him, and obviously college basketball benefits by getting a star to come back to college basketball.
Well, Adam, I'm going to go to you on Alex Condon, because you're talking big-time teams, a national championship team in the Florida Gators, and Condon announcing yesterday he's returning and going back to the Gators. They aren't one of the three co-favorites to win it right now, but what does this do for their chances to try to repeat?
Oh, I think they're right there. And this wasn't necessarily a surprise, but what it does is it solidifies a front court that should be the very best in college basketball next year. Remember, Thomas Hoke is coming back. Ruben Chignello, he's got monster size, monster length. Those three together make as formidable of a trio as you will see in college basketball next season. And then they've got guards there as well, because they struck gold with Boogie Fland and Xavion Lee out of the transfer portal. So the Gators and Todd Golden have really done as well this offseason as you could possibly hope for, given some of the constraints they had. We knew they were losing Walter Clayton. We knew some of the guys were going to go through the draft process, but to get that front court back, to get Condon to a place where he can show the potential he showed at times this season, because let's face it, they won a national championship, but he did not help his NBA draft stock in that run. He'll be able to run it back, potentially play his way into the first round next season. That was not going to be the case in 2025, and all the while put the Gators in position to contend for a repeat.
So you have some of these players deciding to come back and return to the team that they played for. You have others who are going elsewhere. We mentioned Lendeborg going to Michigan, and a really interesting one, Kyle, in P.J. Haggerty. What has he decided to do?
Yeah, P.J. Haggerty from Memphis is going to Kansas State. He's going to transfer. This is a guy who was probably going to end up being a second-round pick, and I think a guy who will end up benefiting from coming back to college. He was the third leading scorer in all of college basketball last season. He was an All-American. He's now transferring to his fourth school in 4 years, and this is a guy who, at Kansas State, under Jerome Tang, Kansas State's looking to get back into the NCAA tournament. They haven't made it to the NCAA tournament the last 2 years. Haggerty last season, one of the most prolific scorers in college basketball, led Memphis to the NCAA tournament. And I think Haggerty has a chance to be the leading scorer in college basketball for a Wildcats team that looks like it actually has the talent to compete for an NCAA tournament appearance next season.
Yeah, they made that big splash last year in the transfer portal. Didn't quite work out for them last season. One of the three co-favorites right now, the team that came so close to winning it all last season, the Houston Cougars, they are getting Milos Uzan back in the fold. Adam, within one play last season, does this make them, in your opinion, the team to beat next year?
Well, I think to your previous point, they are definitely in the group of just a select few. But make no mistake about it, being in that group of a select few was contingent upon getting Milos Uzan back, and now they have. Uzan he really did develop significant draft momentum in the latter part of the season, specifically down the stretch of conference play and then into the NCAA tournament. So there was a while there, especially a couple weeks ago, where this was very much up in the air. But it is a huge get for Houston because it does a couple of different things. One, it stabilizes their veteran core. They've got Manny Sharp and JoJo Tugler. Now they have 3 true veterans that they can rely on. Remember, Kelvin Sampson is bringing in the best recruiting class we've seen at Houston so far under his leadership. He's got 3 different top 25 players coming in, but now there's a clear hierarchy in that lineup, and he doesn't have to put too much too soon on guys like Chris Senak, Isaiah Harwell, and most of all, Kingston Flemings, who will get to learn behind Uzan at the point guard position for the better part of a year before presumably taking over the following season as a sophomore. So I think this not only sets them up as a national championship contender, but it builds the bridge to their future when we start looking at 2 seasons down the road, which is something, quite frankly, that most college basketball teams can't do in this day and age.
So those are the guys that are coming back in this new age of college basketball when you can get a lot of money. Still have until midnight to pull out of the NBA draft. Adam, what's going to be the deciding factor in your mind for Auburn's Tahad Pettiford, who could be a late first rounder?
Yeah, this is really a tough decision. What makes Pettiford's situation a little bit different than some of the other ones we've talked about is that he has not put his name in the portal. So for negotiating purposes, basically he's got his offer from Auburn, and then his agency and their representatives are scouring the market in the NBA. And this is a big, this is a big risk because ironically, he's going to know the price tag at Auburn, but in the NBA, he's right on that first round bubble. If you're in the first round, you get a guaranteed multi-year deal. If you go into the second round, that contract is not guaranteed. Now, some of these promises that you hear people talk about, those become more common in the second round. Teams will say, hey, if you slip, we will take you here and sign you to this type of deal. So these are the types of negotiations that are undoubtedly happening behind the scenes that will ultimately shape what Tahad Pettiford does. And at this point, we now have less than 12 hours before we will know for sure. But I would expect those negotiations to continue for the better part of the day, because this is ultimately going to be about guarantees and dollars and cents.
Kyle, let's go to the Arkansas team that made a run in the NCAA tournament under Coach Cal last season. They have a question mark for one player in Adu Thero, but Carter Knox is going to return. What kind of a key piece is that going to be next season for the Hogs?
Significant and underrated for Carter Knox. This is a guy who was a really high-level recruit, top 25 recruit entering last season at Arkansas. He's 6'6". He's a premium wing, shot 35% on threes last season as a true freshman at Arkansas. And this was the first year for John Calipari with the Razorbacks, a situation where he actually had quite a bit of veteran experience on that roster. Knox will actually be among them next season, coming back to Arkansas for a second season. I think there was some real momentum to potentially get drafted here for Knox because he's 6'6". He has a 6'10" wingspan, can shoot the three. There's a lot of potential versatility. Comes back to Arkansas next season. I think he has a chance to play his way into next year's first round, and I think we'll be able to take a leap in terms of role next season for John Calipari and that Arkansas team in 2025.
Sometimes the biggest portal ads are the guys who just decide to come back, and they still have their fingers crossed in Fayetteville, think that Adu Thero is going to return. What can you tell us about his decision today?
Well, they better cross their fingers on both hands, cross their toes, because they're going to need all the luck they can get. I think most of the intel has been trending towards him being really committed to the draft process. Now, this is somewhat counterintuitive in this cycle because he is not necessarily viewed as a locked first-round pick, and the vast majority of players on that first-round bubble are choosing the guaranteed money of college basketball. But Thero, so far what we have heard and the expectation is he is the exception, and he's really interested in pursuing this professional pathway. Still has a chance to play his way into the first round. I think a lot of that'll come down to how well he shoots the ball in those individual workouts, because there's a lot of optimism about his strength, his body, his defense, but it's going to come down to the shooting. So my expectation is that he stays in the draft. And I would also add this, with Knox and Billy Richmond, who ascended at the end of his last year as a freshman last season, I think Arkansas is more than covered right now at the wing position.
There's also a player we don't even have ranked on our big board, our top 60, and his decision is still up up in the air. What's the latest on Kentucky's Otega Oweh, Kyle?
Yeah, Oweh, we're taking it up until the final hour here, it appears, with Oweh. And we've not been ranking him in our top 60 on our big board because the expectation, at least right now, is we're expecting him to come back to Kentucky next season. This would be a significant addition if he does return. He's still in the NBA draft, kind of waiting to see until the final hour exactly what that decision will be, but led Kentucky last season in minutes, in points, in steals. And Chris, as you mentioned, sometimes the best additions in the portal are the ones that you can retain, or at least the offseason additions are the ones that you can retain, and Oweh would absolutely be that. Kentucky's quietly having a pretty big offseason under Mark Pope. They've added Jaden Quaitnance. They've added Jalen Lowe from Pitt. I think Oweh coming back next season would solidify this roster as a top 15 team in college basketball. He's a rising star, and I think another year at Kentucky would do Oweh really well next season with the Wildcats.
Just a tick before midnight, the deadline for players to decide whether or not they're going to pull out and return to college next season or stay in the NBA draft. 24/7 Sports has you covered with all the rankings you need, whether it's basketball, football, of course, Arch Manning, one of our top guys over there, and he's going to be taking over at Texas this season. Cooper Flagg is going to be the #1 player off the NBA draft board.